Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out investformore.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Invest for More podcast. Last week, we were talking to PJ Ghadimi about his $50 million business, $10 million business, how he's been successful in real estate, basically every aspect of his life after coming from Iran, France, and then to the United States at a very young age with basically nothing. Last week's episode was super long, so we decided to cut it into 2. So the rest of the podcast will be on today's show. Hope you enjoy it. A lot to talk about still, about how he avoided the real estate crash, his businesses, and some programs he has for people to learn to become an entrepreneur, and then how he's giving back after he's gotten so much from society. So stay tuned for a great show. You know, you're able to see an economic downturn coming, and a lot of us in the industry with the crazy lending and different things going on kind of saw the bubble coming. And now we're hearing similar things. Prices are too high. The economy is not really as strong. I mean, are you paying attention to that stuff now? Do you have an opinion on what you think the economy is doing 10 years later?
Do you know what the indicator was that made me get out the first time?
No, what was?
Okay, you're going to laugh a lot. So I had a neighbor, because I was still in the same house, and it was a nice townhome. You know, it was a really nice townhome. But I had a neighbor who was a cab driver. Like him and his brother lived in this one house. They were cabbies. They both drove a cab. They made like $50K each, a year. So it was like $100K. And they once came to me and they were like, so we're trying to buy a $1.2 million home. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, what do you mean a $1.2 million home? They're like, yeah, so we have this opportunity to buy this $1.2 million home, and we have an opportunity to actually sell it, like very soon after. So we would like to actually buy it. And we know you're a banker, so can you get us approved? I was like, okay, so 2 cabbies making $100K, first off, shouldn't be buying a $1.2 million home, period, let alone be investing in a $1.2 million home. I took them to, actually, I wasn't working at a bank, I was head of a bank, so I wasn't actually there doing the paperwork. So I sent them to like one of my managers, and I was like, hey, once you get them approved, get you some credit on the books. If it works, like, I don't know their credit, but try them. So he gets them approved in like 15 minutes. And I'm like sitting there like, get the fuck out of here. Like these guys shouldn't be in this house. And then that's when a light bulb went out. I'm sure you've heard the term when people say like invest when others are afraid, and then run when others are investing, kind of thing.
Yeah. And
it really hit me. I was like, if they're getting approved, other people are getting approved with the same bullshit, kind of like no doc, no nothing. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is really bad. I'm like, if a bank's taking it, I was like, we're taking this. I'm like sitting this. I'm like, so 2 things happened. First, I realized that my corporate career was about to go to shit real fast, because I was like looking like 5 years ahead. I underestimated that one. I thought I gave myself 5 years. I really had 2.5, 3 max, But I was like, yeah, this is going to hurt the bank, whatever is going to hurt that. But then I started realizing, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should really get out of everything I'm doing, because once regulation changes, and I knew it would change, I was like, the demand is going to go to shit, and the supply is going to be the roof, because people are building everywhere. So I said, you know what? Let me just get out now. And I'll get out early. And my uncle was actually like, oh, I'm going to get out next year. I was like, yeah, you do that. I was like, I'll just get out now. It's okay. Let's not get too greedy. Like, I'd just rather take my time selling rather than try to rush the sale with prices plummeting. So that's exactly what I did. Like, I got out early because of that indicator. And then the Florida thing was the same thing. I really decided, I was like, I don't want to be in so much kind of in liability. So I need to kind of have more positive assets. So I need to have cash. And so I dropped everything, and I just got my money back and pretty much sat there. A lot of the Florida properties I had at the time, actually, I didn't make really any money. By the time commissions were paid and everything else, a few of them really ended up being washes. A few others were like 10, 20 grand on top. So it wasn't really million play or anything else. So most of my money was made in lots. Anything that happened after was really a safety thing to kind of like try to get out without losing money. And it worked out pretty well because I got out early, but it wasn't a money play anymore at that point.
And I know you're not in the industry. Well, you're actually in the credit industry now a little bit. So, I mean, I don't see many of those same indicators now, but maybe you might have a different viewpoint on what our economy and the regulations are doing at this, 10 years later.
So I think I look at the past as a measure of what's going to happen in the future. And I think in any society, the more you increase, obviously, population, the more you introduce new regulation and new issues, the only thing that changes is not what's going to happen, but it's how quickly it's going to happen and how long it's going to last. So the recession this time was worse than the Great Depression, but the way it was felt was not as bad because we're a global economy. So in other words, poverty lines are very different than what they used to be, if that makes sense. Making $30K a year now, you're technically poor, but you're still in a house with a couch and a TV. So there's a little bit of a different play on what poverty means today as what it meant then. And as a country, we've evolved so much that the capitalism part the system works so well in preventing major chaos, in our opportunity to devalue our currency. So I don't think that our economy is ever at the same risk as it was back then from what happens to the public standpoint. I think our economy is in a worse shape than it's ever been before because of the debts we have, et cetera. But I think that the fact that we're a global economy more and more, and the more we continue to go forward, I think this is why before, like what happened, the US fell, then Europe fell, then Asia fell. The same order continues, except it's just going to continue in the same exact process. It's just going to happen faster and hurt less every time because it's going to recover faster. But again, we're not changing the patterns or the trends. So because we're not, as an organization or as a society, we're not changing the patterns or the trends that allow us to move forward, we're also kind of allowing these things to continue happening because we have to choose between functioning and growing versus kind of being very conservative, sitting in a room and saying, okay, everybody, let's have a shared problem for the next 2 years. Nobody grows for 2 years. In a society that's been taught for 30 years that everything you do here is about making more money or growing more. And now you want to tell everybody, well, everybody stop. Let's all, take our hands out of the cookie jar. Nobody does anything. And then eventually we'll figure out how to solve this. I mean, the problem with an economy like this is that you've trained everybody to be hunters and hungry and constantly growing. And then the only way you can really stop that is if you can organize a hunt and take everybody away and say, even though you're hunting better than everyone else, I need you to stop. And someone's like, well, screw you. I don't have to stop.
Right.
Like, well, why would I stop? I'm making more money than most of you. And so there's always the ego play. And so I think as an economy, as long as we continue this way, I don't think we'll ever die. I just think we'll have to adapt no different than we adapted then to recessions and, how the markets change, the credit markets change. And today, I mean, you mentioned I'm in the credit market. Yeah, I'm part of a credit organization that focuses on repairing credit, but only on the basis of automotive dealerships. So it's a very unique model. It's not really a widespread model, to be in a major organization that deals with credit analysis or anything else. But we help people improve their credits when they're at the dealership trying to buy a car and are unable to do so.
Great. And that's how I first found you and your site as researching exotic cars and for a different site I'm working on, and found your exotic car buying guide, which was very interesting. And then found Secret Entourage, which you started as a coaching kind of motivational program. But when did you first know you wanted exotic cars, and what are a couple of your exotic cars you've got now?
So when did I first know I wanted an exotic car? I've always been a car guy. When I was really young, I worked my ass off. I bought my first car when I was like 16 and a half in cash. It was a Firebird, like one of those Trans Ams, the earlier day cars. And I wanted one. And I bought it cash for like 27 grand. I'll never forget it because I was working like a slave from like 15 to 16 and I figured out how to do it. So I eventually made it happen. Since then, every year or so, I upgraded my car to something else. Like I went through my series of Mustangs and everything else. And I got to having an AMG, like an E55 AMG, which was a really nice car. By no means exotic before someone in your audience steers me a new one for saying that a Mercedes isn't exotic. But it wasn't exotic. It was just a nice 4-door car. It was like 70 grand used at the time. And I realized that I really wanted like better, you know, and I didn't want to keep buying normal cars. Like I was going to buy a 911. I was like, unless it's a turbo, like I don't want it, or a GT2 or something. And I had a client that actually, I was in banking, you know, like I told you, and I had a client that was actually getting a loan on her brand new 911 turbo. She had bought it. She wanted to refi it. And she got me in the parking lot. She was like, she knew I was a car guy. She was like, oh my God, do you want to see it? I said, sure. You know, I came out, drove, like literally sat in the car, and she was like, do you want to drive it? The minute I put my hands on the steering wheel, it was like carbon fiber. I turn on the ignition, and it says Porsche on the navigation system. And I'm like, okay. I knew then, I was like, I belong in this. This isn't like part of maybe, you know, I should have this. I was like, this is no different than if it was mine right now. It feels really real. You know, it feels possible, real, and I'm holding it. So there's no reason I have to let it go. And I think from that day on, I really put my mind to like, I wouldn't upgrade my car again until I could afford, you know, that car, because that was my dream car. My first dream car was a 911 turbo. I came out, and I remember I used to tell my staff, I was like, I have one of those soon, you know, like before I'm 30. And I was like young. I was like 20, I think it was 21. And so they were like, you're going to have a 911 turbo before you're 30. I was like, yeah. And they were like, yeah, okay. And by 23, I bought 2 of them. So, you know, like, again, this was the whole thing that like, if you want something, you set your mind to it, you know, you create a possibility for you to make it happen. But in that, when I got my first 911 turbo, I really realized the leverage owning an exotic car had. It was so much more than having a car and driving it. You know, it was like the circle of friends you create, the like kind of that whole being accepted in groups that you previously were closed off to. You know, you were a spectator of life versus your driver now, you know, and therefore you're led past the ropes, you know. And so it was such a different feeling. And then actually at the time I had a car wash thing, which today is known as VIP motoring, but at the time was nothing more than car wash. And because of that car, because of my first 911 turbo, I was able to like put wheels on it and stuff like that. And I started getting a lot of attention because nobody was souping up exotics then, you know? And so that opened up the door to starting to do customizations at my car wash place. And then I started really growing that, and that turned into like 4 years later into a huge concierge service. You know, just the idea of like leveraging, I'm actually writing an article for Business Insider now called how buying a Lamborghini could change your life, and not just in business. But, you know, after that, I made a goal to have a Lamborghini in 2 years, and I had one a year later. I had my first Gallardo, and it was, at the time, it was a big deal. You know, today Gallardo is like no different than S-Class. But at the time, it made a difference. You know, people were like, oh my God, you're a Lambo and you're so young. True, every year since then, I've upgraded cars, and now I'm doing it with multiple cars at a time. And you brought up my system. I never lose money on these cars. So while people think that you have to be ultra wealthy to play with exotic cars, it's actually more affordable than driving a Honda or something. Because for me, I'm able to find the right cars using that system. I'm able to find them, leverage them, and then ultimately, when I'm ready to get rid of them because either I don't want them or I get bored of them or whatever it is, then I can sell them either for more money or exactly what I paid for. And so I don't actually lose money getting in and out of exotics, which, you know, is a good deed versus having someone else buy a Mercedes and then a year later, you know, when they're down like 50 grand in depreciation because nobody else wants an S-Class when there's 80,000 of them on the road every year. You know, like it's a nice car, but it holds no value once it's volume. So I always buy very unique exotics. And today in my collection, I'm a big Aston Martin fan. Through the years, I've gone through a lot of different cars, and I've come to the realization that no matter what, I always go back to an Aston. So now I have 2 really cool Astons. I have a DBS. It's actually currently the world's most modified Aston DBS. It's hammerhead silver on red interior. It's one of a kind, built with 80V1 wheels and every possible modifications you can do to it, including things that are not out in the marketplace yet. I have the same exact car in one of 4 built infrared colors, which is a vibrant red that Aston built for its launch in 2009. That was the DBS was always my flagship car for Aston that I've always wanted. When I bought one, I was like, why not buy 2? I got a good opportunity to buy another one, so I bought it too. So one's really a daily, the other one's a weekend kind of thing. And in my collection, I also have a Maserati Quattroporte completely customized for a daily driver, which I rag around everywhere like a Honda Civic. And then outside of that, I just acquired a really rare car. It's a 2011 Super Sport Bentley convertible, which Bentley only built 100 of. At the time was like 380 grand or something, like insane. And it's pearl white with like saddle interior, pure carbon fiber everywhere. And it has a white suede in it, which is really unique. And I think Bentley only built 100 convertibles and only 3 of them with a white exterior and saddle interior. So it was a unique car. Went to Cars and Coffee one day, saw it, and I was like, hey, you know what? I should own a Bentley. Too young for a Bentley, but it's been a good experience so far. All I can tell your viewers is if you're planning on playing with exotic cars, you can do so. You can find the system at exoticcarsecrets.com. But the main thing to remember with any exotic is that despite all the stuff I talk about getting in and out of cars and not losing money, you still have to have a cash surplus somewhere so you can afford the oops, because sometimes oops happen. I mean, you should know this, Mark, right? Like you know, like that one button that stops working and it pisses you off on the inside is like $800. And I'll give you a good example. I had my BBS, one of my BBSs started squealing. And I was like, what is this squeal? Like, it's driving me crazy. You know, I'm like one of those really anal guys that like hates like every like nicks and like little buttons or whatever. And this car starts squealing, and I was like, oh shit. So apparently someone has spread some kind of chemical on the ceramic rotors. So ceramic rotors, like when they went to the car wash, some idiot before me actually put that car to the car wash. So ceramic rotors are like, people don't know this, they're like $6,000 a side. So that means that for 4 rotors, like 25 grand. And you're like, what do you mean 25 grand for brakes? And it's like, no, 25 grand for rotors. Like $700 a side for pads, plus then the install, and all that crap. So you're talking about a 30 grand brake job, right? And if you're not well connected in the industry, like I have a lot of connections, I was able to get sponsors and people like pretty much sack me a set for free. But if you don't have 25 grand, laying around, like how do you fix that? You can't. So the only thing you can do is either you're stuck with a car that squeals that you're not going to be able to resell because nobody wants a squealing car every 2 seconds, or you're going to have to cough up 25 grand. So if you get to a place where you're not that experienced and you have a lot of oopses, it can cost you a lot of money. So I think, like I always tell people, even if you can afford to get in a Lamborghini right away, using my system, definitely get into something easier that can give you experience and comfort, with driving and understanding and creating a network before you go in and buy like something more rare, like a Diablo or something that requires maintenance, that may be heavier for someone that's new in the game.
And we'll send a link to your site too on our page. But yeah, I have my 99 Diablo. And just like you said, I bought it for 126 last year. And it's hard to know what values are, but it's probably worth 170, 180 now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're probably going to make 50 grand when you choose to get rid of it. And there's no urgency in you getting rid of it, which is the great part, right?
Yep. And then it's in for service right now too. And it needs new front shocks, which are $7,900 to replace those. So you get the good and the bad with the cars. But
you're going to eat a little bit of that margin away,
Right, exactly.
But you're also enjoying it, right? Like you get to drive it, you get to enjoy it. It does wonders for your business, for your relationships, for just the aspiration to others who aspire to do similar things. So it has a lot of value.
Yeah. Now I've met an incredible amount of people through that car, just because at car shows or people who see me or on the blog too. And it's just been a ton of fun. Yeah, I drive it probably 3 times a week too. So it definitely gets its use. But all right, on from cars. One last thing I want to talk about for sure is Secret Entourage and what you're doing with that site and what your goal is. I know it's got a ton of incredible content on it. And how did that start and where's it at right now?
So Secret Entourage was, I used to make a lot of money. I still do. Like I'm okay with like finance. I'm financially okay, or so I would say. Like I'm not the richest guy in the block, but I'm okay where I don't have to worry about, anything. Like I don't worry about the cars I drive, the house I live in. And having that comfort financially was fantastic very early on. But one day I came to stop and I had all these cars sitting in my lot. I had this beautiful house. And I started thinking to myself, I said, what am I known for? If I died tomorrow, like someone got me hit by a car and I went to my funeral, what would people say about me? And then I started thinking about 2 groups of people. First, one group, because at that point, remember, I was self-employed. I had my businesses. I was completely out of banking. And I thought 2 people would say something about me. First, the people that knew me, which were my friends, they would all be like, oh my God, he had such beautiful cars. He was always this inspiring guy. But that's it. Like it would end there. So if someone in the neighborhood had nicer cars, then I would be quickly forgotten, right? And I'm sure someone is going to have nicer cars in that block in the next like 5 years after I die. So it was like, that kind of sucks, right? When your friends only would remember you for the cars you had or the things you had, which don't mean shit. And then I was like, there's a second group of people that would remember me for something completely different. those people are the ones that remember me from back in banking, because I used to take a lot of chances growing and building people. So I hired a parkometer maid once to be like a regular salesperson in a bank. And in 3 years, I made him the VP of business banking. And, people were like, this guy used to collect coins. Like, he didn't have any intelligence, barely spoke English. And I was like, yeah, but if you invest time and energy in people, they can first off invest that time and energy in more people. So you create a good chain reaction. And then two, just because he wasn't given an opportunity didn't mean he was an idiot, there's definitely value in helping people. And I think that's a chain reaction that we need more people to do. So I came to this realization that those people would probably tell my story to their kids, their grandkids, and even their grandkids would tell their story to someone else about how one guy took a chance on their dad one day. And, their dad now was like super successful and was able to live a better life and provide for their family. And so I thought to myself, and I said, I was really good training. I said, why don't I just create a blog where I just kind of share my thoughts, like about what it takes to be successful. And maybe kids will want to know about it, especially because I went through a lot. I got fired, I got hired, I moved up the ranks really quick, etc. So, and then everybody used to ask me every 2 days, like, oh my God, what do you do for a living, dude? You have all these cars, you're young. Like, how do you do this? Like, what do you do? And so I got tired of answering that question too. So I said, I'll just put a sticker on my car or something, and they can just follow and go to the website and read on, like marketing. But I didn't think of it as a business. I just was like, yeah, let's just put it on and kids can learn and everything else. And long story short, it completely sucked. Like, I wrote a lot of crap on a blog and I was talking about like corporate leadership and shit that like kids were like, what are you fucking talking about, man? Like, this is retarded. Like, how do you get the Lamborghini? That's what I want to know. And I was like, okay, like you have to learn this stuff too. And they were like, yeah, I want to learn this. So I realized that like the reason why there's a huge disconnect in anywhere really on how education is perceived. Like, we think of education as boring and really something that just we don't want to do. We're forced to do because we're going to be successful with it. Nobody likes to learn, but they like to learn once they know there's a reward at the end of it. They're like, I'm going to learn and I'm going to get $1 million out of it. So I was like, we got to be able to change that because society is not going to get better and that situation is going to get worse. So after my blog sucked for a year, it generated good traffic to the articles, but it wasn't like targeted traffic. It was just people that were like, I don't know who this clown is, but I'm reading his crap anyways, So I started coming to this realization that maybe this is bigger than just like a blog. Maybe it needs to be sexy and it needs to attract younger people by being better, not just being about corporate leadership. And so I started putting more thought behind it. I started attracting a few kids that were in the internet marketing space, and one of them was a designer. So we started getting together and I said, look, I'm not in this space. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. You guys know what the hell you're doing. So I'll provide content. You guys just build, like I'll create vision, ideas, and everything else. One of you will build it. The other one will market it. It should be good to go. And really what we created or what we wanted to create was the stories of people behind exotic cars and really what they did for a living. So like, that's kind of how we met, and we talked originally because we have an exotic car and people wonder like, how do you drive a Diablo in real estate? It doesn't make any sense. Right. Unless you're a major real estate tycoon, to most people's perception, they don't understand that stuff. So we decided to create like a website where we would share the stories of car owners and what they've done in their life to get to where they are. And through those stories, the one thing we would do differently from everybody else, we would make a learning sexy. Like we would make sure that the articles are full of beautiful imagery and that the site is not just an internet marketing site that has like, would you like to earn $1 million? Click here now, and then we'll take it as video and then cross-sell you bullshit. Instead, we thought like, let's create a platform that really creates a ton of value for kids to want to be on there, watch the stories and aspire. And one of the things I learned very early on, because I was in training a lot of my corporate America time, is that the best way to teach people is not by telling them what to do, but by influencing them, by showing them what you've done. So they kind of maybe click in instead of being like, hey, you suck at what you do, go do something else. And so what ended up happening is these concepts all kind of were scattered all over the place. And it took us like 3.5, 4 years to really kind of come together and continue to build content and do these things, but really understand what we were doing. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Even with all my experience, with all my, things I was doing and all the money I had, it still took time to understand what the brand was, what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go. If there was even a monetization strategy, I wrote like 9 books. And they were great books, but they sucked. Like nobody bought them. You know, I was like, they were buying a few of them, but like it was making like $2,000 for the website. And I was like, $2,000 for the website is terrible. You know, like it's just like, it's not going to support the amount of time and effort we're putting in this. And so what I was doing, I came up with this idea. I said, well, I don't really need the money from this. So I'll take all the money we make from this site, and outside of supporting the site, like whatever it costs to make it, I'll take any profit the site has, and I'll invest in helping low to moderate income kids across the US in person. So instead of doing speaking engagement where school pays me $30,000, as long as the business Secret Entourage is supported, then what I do is I take the money from there and I invest it in going out speaking and also giving out free books and giving out free, academy memberships today to helping low to moderate income communities where kids don't have access to education, like where their parents don't support it because they want them to get a job and nobody knows what to do. So everybody has a choice between either drugs or you're screwed, so it's like, I wanted to kind of put an end to that. And long story short, really, we've become a huge e-learning platform where I interview anyone who's done anything extraordinary. And it doesn't have just to be like people who've made $1 million, anyone extraordinary. And then I have them share with our audience their story and their tips to succeed in their industry. So it's like self-education for the new century. And I make sure there's the commonality of usually exotic cars or lifestyle where it can be aspiring and also kind of have that valid proof in front of people. Like the fruit is there for you to see it. So it's not like, oh, you're talking. Like if you Google me, you can see like my whole car collection, etc. It's not like it's hidden behind a wall. Like I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. So I wanted more, they say like money talks, wealth whispers. So I said, fuck that. I want wealth to really start shouting because we need people who are wealthy and willing to share to aspire. Because too many people that are broke are sharing their stories, trying to accumulate more customers. When really the wealthy guys that should be talking are like, oh, I don't want someone to judge me. Like, because if they know I have money, like, I don't give a shit about that. Like, you're going to come out there and you're going to tell me how you bought a Pagani, what you did to get it, and like what your life looked like. And if you're not, then you have something to hide, right? I looked at it that way. I was like, if you don't want to talk about it, then you're not worth knowing anyways. So I really, started that. And today we've interviewed over 200 people. And despite my first 9 books really not doing well, I finally wrote one called Third Circle Theory, which became a huge bestseller across everywhere. It was a self-published book, currently sold over 150,000 copies. And on Amazon, it's doing incredible great. It's like top 50 business books in the country. And the reason the book became really famous versus the other ones was that its focus was not on how to do something in business, but rather how to grow self-awareness. Like 3 years ago, I came up with this concept that self-awareness trumps education. And so I was like, how do you understand self-awareness? Because it's such an abstract subject. So my book broke down like all the path, like almost like a roadmap, not to being the most successful, but to being extremely self-aware. And as a result of that, being able to tackle on more things like growing your confidence, your belief system, and taking on business or investments in a way where you're not emotional. I mean, you should know best that when you get emotional about investments, you lose a lot more money, right? Than when you stay steady. Well, yeah. How do you learn that, right? Because you're young. How do you learn to control your emotions, right? In an investment when it's your first time investing. So by creating this book, I was able to really teach people self-awareness. And I mean, today, just the hashtag Third Circle Theory on Instagram has like 20,000 like people like saying, hey, this changed my life, this to this. So it took 9 attempts, just so your audience knows, 9 attempts at writing books that didn't work. And it took 1 attempt at writing one that did work because of what I learned in the first 9. And then the best part is I've never read a book in my life. So try that. Like, I don't even like reading. I wrote 10, 1 of them made it, so it's really the gist in business is that it's not really about like making it the first time. It's about just not giving up and sticking the course till the very end, And so that's what we did with Secret Entourage. And our goal with it, as you asked me earlier, is to grow it into a bridge between self-education and formal education. So we know that like right now people go to school, come out as survivors, and everybody wonders like, well, what do I have to learn that I don't learn in school? And what we are trying to do is create a community of people, which has grown tremendously now, where people who have succeeded, who we've verified, who have done something tremendously well in their own path, can now share those tricks or things they've done in their industry to succeed outside of education, outside of formal education, which enables someone maybe that's in college to start learning. So as they expand their awareness, they're in college, they're going to have a much better chance of coming out of college with a clear expectation, like we talked about earlier. A lot of people don't have that. And also a lot of awareness to know what to do instead of like standing there holding their dick in their hand and being like, I don't know what to do now. Like, I'm out of school. I'm going to work. I hate my life. This can't be all that life has to offer. So I hope that makes kind of a little bit of sense and explains what we do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And the people you interview, they're high level people. I mean, there are some awesome Grant Cardona's on there, a few other guys who most people, not just guys who own fancy cars, but multi-millionaires who share their story. It's really,
I mean, we break it down into two concepts, like people who have really made it, that may not be as believable for others starting up, that like, they're like, I can't be this guy because he's done it for 20 years, Like, and it's fair. Like, it's fair to say. So we also have the other side, which are people who are very successful, but still in the grind, who are still sharing, like, not necessarily saying, hey, I'm still trying to make it, but are rather saying, hey, I've already kind of made it, but I'm not to the point where I have an empire behind me and $100 million, like coming in every year, but rather are saying, hey, you know what? I'm still working. I'm still doing really well. I have the exotic cars and I know a lot about the industry because I'm still in it, versus someone who's out of it. Like, I don't know as much in real estate as you do, because you're in it every day and you see it and you're part of it. For me, it's not, right? So even if I may have made more or less money, whatever it is before, I'm still not the best person to ask about real estate, if that makes sense. And so there's better successful people like you in that space that are going to be a better teacher in that space than someone like me who had an opportunity at some point jumped in, regardless of what our bank accounts look like.
I really appreciate you taking the time to discuss, your whole story, how you've made it, advice for people. I have a lot of the same mindset, and so much about success is attitude, and your attitude, not just education. And hard work is part of it, but you've got to couple hard work with self-awareness, like you said. And I'll put up links to your site so people can find you, the car site and Secret Entourage. Anything else you want to add before we end this?
No, I would just tell people that you have to believe in what you're doing, but you have to align your belief with the work you're willing to put in to make that belief a reality. So I think as long as you stay true to that, you can be successful regardless of what path you choose in life.
Awesome. Great ending words. All right, PJ, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And look forward to maybe talking to you here soon again.
You got it. Thanks again for having me on, Mark.
All right. Take care.